What the city is talking about.
The news that impacts you.
Welcome to the Montreal Now podcast
with Aaron Rand and Natasha Hall.
Welcome to another edition of The Week That Was here on the iHeart Radio Network. I'm Aaron Rand along with Natasha Hall, and this week we'll be looking at these stories. 2 brazen murders committed in broad daylight within a matter of only weeks have shone the spotlight on criminal gangs in Montreal again. We'll speak to a former Montreal detective who spent 30 years working organized crime to try and shed some light on what might be happening.
He broke the whole story on Chinese election interference with his work for the Globe and Mail. Robert Fife has remained steadfast in his determination to get this story out. And like Special Rapporteur David Johnston, he will not be deterred in his work either. We spoke to Mr. Fife again this week about the latest developments.
Apple captured headlines in the tech world this past week when it introduced its new Vision Pro virtual reality headset, the closest thing yet to a wearable PC. CTV tech analyst CARMI LEVY will explain whether it's a game changer or destined to become yet another entry on the VR trash heap.
But we begin with this. Sometimes when certain people speak, they can make things crystal clear that before perhaps had not been so clear. That's certainly how we felt when we spoke to former Canadian Senator Joan Fraser about Bill C-13. I don't think you'll hear a more convincing argument as to why it is a threat to Anglophones and why senators should not adopt the bill.
We know that arguments have been made that including the Charter of the French language in the Official Languages Act will not diminish the rights of English-speaking Quebecers. I suggest that those arguments were perhaps conceived before C-13 was amended to include a reference to the Quebec law in the purpose clause of the Official Languages Act. Our legal assessment has always been that to mention Quebec's French language charter within the Official Languages Act does pose a danger to our community's rights. This becomes even clearer in the version of the bill that is now before you. You've heard from the dean of one of the world's most respected law schools that this inclusion could have serious and lasting effects on language rights. A former Supreme Court justice has pointed out to this committee that the 2 language regimes, Canada's and Quebec's, are not compatible. They are fundamentally different. They have different purposes to achieve different aims. Yet they are now being forced together with the help of an undisclosed agreement between Canada and Quebec. It represents a monumental change to the quasi-constitutional Official Languages Act, and it has implications for Canada's unity. We submit that withdrawing the references to the Charter of the French language from C-13 would in no way diminish or abrogate the rights of or support to French-speaking minority communities. There is, however, danger in retaining those references, danger to the English-speaking community of Quebec, and also danger in setting up an official languages regime that creates a precedent for other provinces to impose restrictions on their own linguistic minorities, as Quebec has done. And if the committee wants examples of those restrictions, we can give them to you in the question period.
That is Joan Fraser, former Canadian senator, former journalist, speaking to senators as they have to now decide whether to approve the amendments in that Bill C-13, the amendment to the Federal Languages Act, or not, or send it back and remove some of those, including the 3 mentions, not just in the preamble as we found out, but within the bill itself, referencing Bill 96, Bill 101 before it. Joan Fraser's on the phone. Thank you so much for being here.
A pleasure.
Can we begin with what you said? Because I will tell you, when we first played that yesterday, we received so many text messages from people saying, finally someone's standing up, finally someone's saying what needs to be said in a cogent way. I wonder, though, at the end of all this, what actually happens? Because when I asked the question yesterday of Tom Mulcair, for example, and I said, Tom, for all the people, and I know Eva Ludwig was there as well from Quebec community groups making her points, is this a rubber stamp for this Senate? And he said, yeah, it probably is. What's your take?
I'm very much afraid that Tom is right. The government is pressing very hard for this bill to be passed into law before they all rise for the summer break. And for it to be passed into law by then, it would have to go through the Senate unamended. The bill has many friends in particularly in Francophone minority communities. The Fédération des Francophones Acadiennes appeared at the same Senate committee hearing that we did, and their praise was ecstatic, over the top, saying, pass this bill now, don't wait another day. So the representatives from Francophone minority communities, and there are quite a few of them in the Senate, are all very much in favor of the bill. And as I say, the government is pressing very hard for it to be passed. The government leader in the Senate, who is actually an English Montrealer, Mark Gold, spoke at second reading and gave unqualified support, as you would expect, because he's the government representative. But it's very clear that the pressure is on for this bill to be passed, as is.
And therein lies, it would seem to me, as you described this part of the quandary here, right? The issue is, yes, for Francophone rights in the rest of Canada, this is a wonderful bill, and I think you alluded to that basically in your statement. But obviously for Anglos in Quebec, it's a completely different situation. Is there no way to separate one from the other?
Well, we believe that, for starters, removing the references to the Charter of the French language would be very helpful, because when you put in those references, particularly in the purpose clause of the Official Languages Act, you say basically that the courts must interpret, and indeed federal government policies must take into account Bill 96. And that, as far as we're concerned, is a serious danger signal for the English-speaking community. So it could be done. If I had my druthers and I were running things, I would also pay serious attention to the second part of Bill C-13, which is a whole new bill on the use of French in federally regulated private businesses in Quebec. And that bill is very closely aligned with Bill 96. It talks about promoting French everywhere with almost no protections for English or for Anglophones. Little bit of protection for employees who are already employed and who don't speak fluent French, as long as they don't try to get promoted. And the bill says, well, businesses may serve their customers in French, may provide documents in English, may provide documents in English or another language for that matter. But what they must do is have everything in French. And particularly for smaller businesses, if they have to do it in French, they'll do it in French. Will they want to spend the extra money to get everything translated into English as well if they have a lot of English employees? Maybe not.
I'm curious if, in doing what you're doing, in making the case that the Charter is a threat to Anglophones, do you have the impression that you are being heard by the senators?
Well, the Senate is a collection of individual senators, and I think we have had a more careful reception from some than from others. In particular, of course, Judith Seidman and Tony Lafreda, who are English Montrealers and who have spoken quite strongly about the inclusion of the Charter of the French language in a federal law. But some others have indicated some understanding. For example, the Deputy Leader of the Opposition, Senator Poirier from New Brunswick, indicated in her second reading speech that yes, she understood Anglophone concerns, and she understood that those concerns had not been allayed in any way, but she said, I'm going to vote for the bill, and we have to do it quickly. So, it's kind of frustrating.
Well, what is the, this do it quickly part that is what I don't understand. And yes, I understand that in the rest of Canada, as we said earlier, for Franco-Canadians living there, they've had to deal with this law, the language law as it is for many, many years. But do you get the sense that it's not worth spending the extra time needed to make sure that, yes, they can be taken care of and they can get the services they need and have access to them, but at the same time recognize the problems this causes potentially for Anglos in Quebec?
I think the head of the FCFL, when she spoke, made the point that in a minority government, you never know what's going to happen. And it was quite clear she was afraid that for some reason the government would fall if this bill were delayed, and that the government might fall before it got passed in an unamended form. And I think that's a real fear among Francophone minority communities, because there are lots of good things in this bill. There are even some good things for English Quebec as well. But they just worry, and they've waited a long time, and they've worked very hard to try to get a new modernized Official Languages Act up and running. And so they really, really, really want it to go fast. And then, of course, you've seen the periodic eruptions of sentiment in Quebec to the effect that anybody who is opposed to or even wants to amend this bill to solve our concerns is anti-French, anti-Quebec. So few political parties want to run into that buzzsaw.
We're out of time. I did want to ask you one last thing. Maybe this is unfair, how disappointed will you be if and when this does pass?
Very, but not surprised. Very disappointed. Very, very disappointed.
All right. We will leave it at that. Joan Fraser, we thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today. Much appreciated.
Thanks for having me.
Informative.
Interactive.
And always interesting.
This is Montreal Now with Aaron Rand and Natasha Hall.
2 brazen murders committed in broad daylight within a matter of only weeks have shone the spotlight on criminal gangs in Montreal again. We'll speak to a former Montreal detective who spent 30 years working organized crime to try and shed some light on what might be happening.
He was a high-profile member of Montreal's organized crime network. Francesco Del Balso was killed outside of Monster Gym on St. Regis Boulevard. His death comes as no surprise.
Now, he was a known senior mafia member of the Rizzuto crime family. He ran gambling for the Rizzuto clan and was trying to carve out more space for himself. Now, just last month, Claudia Iacono was shot and killed outside her salon in Côte-des-Neiges. She was the daughter-in-law of mafia figure Marino Gallo. But it's not clear if these incidents are linked.
Part of the CTV report on that event that happened yesterday afternoon about 1 o'clock outside Monster Gym out in DDO. We want to know more. Pietro Polletti is an ex-Montreal police investigator who, by the way, has been following the mobs and gangs in the city for more than 30 years, I think, Pietro, right? Around 30 years?
That's right.
You've very graciously allowed us to talk about this today, to come into studio. So first of all, thank you for doing that. I want to ask you the question, as soon as I heard that report, what Maya said, what kind of struck me, his death is no surprise. So when you heard what had happened, broad daylight, another shooting, another mob hit, what'd you think? Was it a surprise?
Not at all. He was definitely overdue. And
wow.
When I read reports and journalists and other commentators saying he was a mafia leader, that is totally false. Totally. Again, we're going into the glorifying the mafia. He was a thug. He was an associate. And he was an enforcer.
Really?
I came across him in an investigation. 2005, he had gone to, with his associates, 4 other goons in Placeville Marine. They beat up a businessman. An aggravated assault. They massacred the person. And we arrested him, and he was just arrogant. So when I hear people, journalists, and other people that are in the field saying he was a mafia leader, that is totally false.
All right, let me go back. He wasn't a leader. From what I'm reading or what I've heard over the past 24 hours, he wanted to be a leader. He tried to infiltrate way up the gang.
He had a crew. He had a crew.
Okay.
The leader reflects his members, and the members reflect the leader, and they were just as bad as him. He was arrogant. Listen, let's go back a year and a half. He threatened the priest because his wife sent his suits to a bazaar in Laval, and that she forgot to remove the...
Oh, I remember the story, yeah. Earrings or something, or jewelry.
In Quebec, he muscled some small pizza guy operation. Montreal, he was still doing the same thing, selling fruits and vegetables. So when I hear people say he was a mafia leader, Not at all. He was a burden to any criminal organization. He last year or two, he was hotter than a branding iron. Nobody would get close to him.
So you would have thought that he knew something was up, and his time was sort of limited.
He knew his time was
What
limited.
would have led to that? Like, I know you don't know specifically necessarily,
But if it's true what the police say, that he was involved in the attempted murder on Leonardo Rizzuto, that's a death wish.
Okay, but let me ask you, that's what I didn't understand. So we know the Leonardo Rizzuto story. They tried to shoot him on the highway. But I thought, from what I've read, and you're going to have to clarify, was he in the Rizzuto clan? So how do you go after Leonardo Rizzuto if you're part of the clan?
What happened was, it's very important, and people have to understand. Our judicial system, they all got arrested in Projet Colisée. And when it comes to Italians' traditional organized crime, they go for the plea bargaining. They never go to trial for various reasons, primarily to save money. So they'll take the deal, 10, 12 years. He was sentenced to 15. And the organization will pay for the lawyers, whatever. Now, when he came out, he was expecting to get back his loan sharking role, his internet gambling.
Well, you said he got sentenced to 15 years. How long did he serve?
He served, I think, 12 years, if I'm not mistaken, 11, 12 years. And he was put aside by the association. His partner was killed, Giordano Lorenzo, who was another hothead, who was... There were more trouble for the organization, the Sicilian clan, than profitable to have them on.
So they were more trouble than they were worth.
That's right. There was a burden. It was unpredictable. You never knew what he was going to do.
And in the case, I think, of Leonardo Rizzuto, the attempted, killing, apparently Francesco Del Balso tried to leave town
2 or 3 days later. And this is what it's also interesting, is that the police arrested him at the airport, seized his passport, but didn't accuse him of any crime. There's a law that you're allowed to seize an object, or
in this case,
for 90 days, pending an investigation. So that time was also expiring, unless they will go in front of a judge to renew that.
Yeah.
So his days were counted. He knew it.
Okay. And if we had to figure out, I heard in this report that we just played the beginning of, this is not the end of it, right? There's retribution for everything in this business, it would seem, and when it comes to the mafia. What are you expecting might happen next?
Okay, we got to distinguish two things. There's a difference between vendetta and revenge. A vendetta is when two clans or two organizations are going at it for years, a feud, family, Hells Angels, Italians, whatever. This was strictly revenge. One individual who attacked an empire, so-called, if it's true that he went after Leonardo Rizzuto, is just signing a death wish. So I don't expect any reprisals. The only thing, the people that were associated with him, if he did commit that act, I think they're running scared now.
What about Claudia in all of this? Because from what we've learned, it's very unusual for a woman to be shot, a woman involved in the family, but not necessarily involved in the business.
Very unusual. Listen, there's various theories, and I think soon people will find out. I don't think it was directly related to organized crime.
Why do you say that?
She had a prominent business. And like you said, yes, we had women involved in organized crime in Montreal. We did. Very powerful also. I don't think she was of that caliber. Her husband still had so-called connections, links. So maybe we'll be surprised on the outcome. We'll be surprised.
But do we tie any of this, to Natasha's point, do we tie any of this together? Claudia Iacono 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, and now Francesco Del Balso, there's a relation here of any kind?
No.
Okay.
I hear, and follow me on this, Claudia, rest in peace, Iacono, whatever, she's Sicilian. She comes from the same town as the Rizzutos. I don't think the Rizzutos would attack a distant cousin, let's say, related, nerdy, there's a relationship. So that theory, is it somebody else, another person, for other personal reasons? I don't know.
Okay.
And the Hells Angels' role in all of this?
the Hells Angels have refined. I don't think they would associate with any of this.
Okay.
I know the SQ, they executed search warrants following the attempt on Leonardo Rizzuto. I think sometimes the police, and I think our listeners have to dissect what you read. The police work based on what journalists will say, instead of the opposite. Our intelligence department at the time were cutting out newspaper articles and considering that intelligence.
Wow.
That's the point we're at. So we got to be very careful on that.
So is this Sicilian versus Calabrian? Is that still an issue or not anymore?
And again, may I elaborate on that? Del Basso was nor Sicilian nor Calabrese. He came from Campobasso. And I hear people, again, saying, well, no, he's part of the Calabrian. No. You can't be from another region in Italy, Campobasso or Northern Italian or Roman, and run a Sicilian family.
Okay.
So right there, you start questioning the credibility.
Pietro,
I think affiliate, but Paul Cherry said it correctly. He was an affiliate, he was an associate, but definitely not a mafia leader.
Paul Cherry, crime writer with the Gazette.
That's right.
Pietro, being who you are and having contacts in both worlds, do you ever worry about your own safety?
Absolutely. Because with individuals, there's a lot of Del Passos on the street left. There's a lot. Hotheads who don't, if there's a code of ethics, they don't really pursue it. I was attacked at home 3 years ago. My mother was attacked. And just hotheads like him.
So, given that things seem to be heating up and we don't really seem to have a real handle on what's happening, should we be worried? Should Montrealers be worried about their safety?
But do we have a handle on what's happening? I mean, did this come out of the blue? I mean, is this what you would expect it to see happen?
I don't think there's a handle. I think who lost in all this event was, and I think the investigators played their cards right, but the other side had the better hand. What they were trying to do by arresting and removing his passport is hopefully he'd become a turncoat, an informant.
Oh, okay.
Okay, that they were playing their cards that way, and that didn't happen. He was killed before that, and that would have been his last door to go knock.
Okay, I wish we had more time because this is fascinating.
It's riveting.
Just to know this is still going on. And by the way, for people who wonder, yes, there's still a mob. There are various gangs. I remember you telling me this a couple of weeks ago. So just as a final question, are you expecting things to get worse, or does this kind of settle down now because this was done?
I think it'll settle down for a while.
Okay.
But like I said, if he had associates that committed an act towards Rizzuto, I think
don't be surprised if they're taking care. Don't be surprised
we'll have a couple of more killings.
Pietro Polletti, thank you so much for coming in.
Informative,
interactive,
and always interesting.
This is Montreal Now with Aaron Rand and Natasha Hall.
He broke the whole story on Chinese election interference with his work for the Globe and Mail. Robert Fife has remained steadfast in his determination to get this story out. And like Special Rapporteur David Johnston, he will not be deterred in his work either. We spoke to Mr. Fife again this week about the latest developments.
Boy, we spent a lot of time talking about David Johnston, but more so perhaps yesterday after his testimony and some of the strange things that came out of that testimony, including, I think it's fair to say at one point, David Johnston contradicting himself. Robert Fife, who of course has been on the story since the get-go, he is the audio bureau chief of the Globe and Mail, is on the line. Mr. Fife, thanks again for your time.
You're welcome.
I don't want to ask you what you thought of the testimony, but I will ask you what you thought of the part. And Tom LeCare, by the way, who said to say hi, pointed out this. He said that in his testimony yesterday, David Johnston actually said that there was no case in which the government didn't act when they found out that something had happened. And then, of course, he found out about Aaron O'Toole, and it's hard to believe that the government would not have acted there. What did you think of that?
Yeah, look, this is what Mr. Johnston said yesterday has blown, in my mind, a big hole in the credibility of his report, because he said in his report that there was not an orchestrated attempt by China to go after the Conservatives party through misinformation or disinformation campaigns. But that's not what Aaron O'Toole told the House of Commons. He had a briefing after the report was tabled, and he said that CSIS told him, and we understand from Mr. Johnson that it was the CSIS director, David Vigneault, who told Mr. O'Toole that, in fact, there was an orchestrated campaign by China both to suppress the vote and to launch a disinformation campaign against the Conservative Party, several members, including himself, and it was orchestrated by China. And when he was asked about that by the NDP leader, Jagmeet Singh, yesterday, he said, well, I was only going on the evidence that I had, or intelligence that I had, when I did my report. There's now clearly there's a big gap between what I said and what Mr. O'Toole has said. And in fact, there is. Mr. O'Toole is not making that up. He was told this by CSIS, and he's a pretty credible guy. So there's a real problem here with Mr. Johnson's report.
So we're going from someone who said at the outset he had all the information to now admitting apparently he didn't have all the information.
Well, and then now he's saying also yesterday, well, I didn't see everything. I saw a lot of documents, but it was an ocean. I got a big lake of documents, and I only had 8 weeks to pull this together. So yeah, maybe I didn't have everything. So if this thing is starting to unravel.
Mm-hmm. It is. And with regards to what Mr. Johnston is seeing and what he isn't seeing, he seems to have some blind spots, some pretty serious blind spots regarding his own potential impartiality, but then also about Toronto lawyer Sheila Block. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah. Look, Mr. Johnson has chosen as his lead counsel, which is basically the top aide who would be seeing all this intelligence and helping him draft the report, a lawyer who, for all of her many qualifications, has exclusively contributed federally money to the Liberal Party of Canada since 2006, if not before then. And she also, we reported this week, attended a private virtual fundraiser with the Prime Minister in March of 2021. So this is not a person who, she's a Liberal. And you've asked a Liberal to help you as your lead investigator, investigating the Prime Minister and how he responded to intelligence reports on Chinese interference in the Canadian electoral process. I mean, in any other situation, this person would not be allowed to do so. It's not. The credibility of the report is undermined when you have somebody who is an out-and-out Liberal being the lead counsel and helping you draft a report on the Liberal government.
Yeah, it seems almost, I hate to say it this way, like a comedy of errors. There have been so many dropped balls, so many flubs in this one, including, Mr. Fife, the fact that David Johnson yesterday said he learned he'd never reached out to MP Han Dong before clearing him in that foreign interference report. How do you clear somebody without having found out the details of that first?
Again, that's mind-boggling because CSIS did raise some very serious allegations about Mr. Dong, his connections to the Chinese consulate in Toronto, and their activities in helping to get him elected in 2019. Now, he says in his report, well, there's no evidence that he necessarily knew about this. Well, wouldn't you have called him up and said, we'd like to talk to you? Because there's a lot of evidence in these CSIS files about you. And but he said he didn't do that because, well, he was preoccupied with a lawsuit against Global News involving a conversation with the Chinese Consul General on whether he suggested that the Michael should be kept for extended period of time in jail until the election was over because releasing him might help the Conservative Party. He said that allegation was false, but the stuff dealing with the allegations of China doing everything they could to help get him elected surely would have required you to say, what did you know about this? And to ask him some serious questions about this.
I feel
straightforward. I'm
going to ask the most ridiculous question possible, but what the heck is going on here? How has this happened? How has it gotten to this? I'm utterly baffled by this whole situation.
I think we're all baffled by it. Mr. Johnson has this idea, that he's this great Canadian who has been a Governor General and has undertaken, He's the head of 2 universities, and he has made a great contribution to Canada. But he is blinded, it seems to me, by his own sense of his self-worth. And he cannot see that his friendship with the Trudeau family, going back to the time when Justin was, 7 years old or more, and through the over his membership in the Pierre Elliott Trudeau Foundation, and the fact that this conflicts were brought out, he said he had asked former Supreme Court Justice Frank Akabuchi to say was he in a conflict of interest in being a member of the Trudeau Foundation and having this role as a special rapporteur. Now, and then he admits yesterday in the committee that, he and Frank Akabuchi were friends since they were 25 years old. And he was also, by the way, a Trudeau mentor, Mr. Akabuchi. So how in the world can you think that is objective? No. And then you hire a Liberal to as your lead counsel.
Yeah.
This simply has no credibility. But the larger problems I have with his report is he simply accepts the word of the government. When he says the Prime Minister, did you know about any of this? Did you take this stuff seriously? Prime Minister says, of course I did. That's the problem with this kind of a special rapporteur role. If you had a public inquiry with full subpoena powers and the ability to cross-examine witnesses who have to be sworn under oath, including right up to the Prime Minister, you would actually get to the truth on whether or not the government knew about any of this and just turned a blind eye.
I'm afraid we have to leave it at that. Mr. Fife, thanks again. Appreciate it. Thanks so much.
You're welcome.
Robert
Bye-bye.
Fife, Ottawa Bureau Chief of the Globe.
What a shame. I find we just keep saying the same things over and over again. What a shame. And again, a man who did have an important place in Canadian history will not be remembered the same with the same respect, the same. That
legacy has taken a sharp left turn, I think, on this whole matter. So, and nobody knows where this ends. I was going to ask, we had no time, whether in fact. So at the end of all this, because it's turned into the debacle that it is, do we get a public inquiry? Is that what's going to happen?
Does Johnston step down? Yeah. Is there an apology from the Prime Minister?
We shall have to wait and see.
Informative.
Interactive.
And always interesting.
This is Montreal Now with Aaron Rand and Natasha Hall.
Apple captured headlines in the tech world this past week when it introduced its new Vision Pro virtual reality headset, the closest thing yet to a wearable PC. CTV tech analyst CARMI LEVY will explain whether it's a game changer or destined to become yet another entry on the VR trash heap.
Introducing Apple Vision Pro. The era of spatial computing is here.
Oh, spatial computing. That's what we're calling it as opposed to a VR headset. CARMI LEVY, CTV tech analyst, joins us every Thursday at this time. CARMI, a big deal at the Worldwide at that developers conference announcing this. This is Apple's major announcement. I mean, it's certainly cooler looking than all the other virtual reality headsets. The question is this a game changer or just the next product that other normal people decide they can't afford and don't want to wear?
Yeah, see, the thing is, it's $3,500 US, probably about $4,700 or close to 5,000 Canadian by the time it goes on sale here early next year. So this isn't something that all of us are going to be buying, and this particular device isn't the one that we're all going to own. But that's the way it works in technology. Version 1 is never the version that you want to buy anyway. Version 2 and version 3 will be better, faster, smaller. Eventually, it'll just be a pair of glasses or a small little wearable. So version 5 or 6, a few years down the line, that's going to be the one that we're all probably going to buy. And so in that context, this announcement, Vision Pro, is kind of like the next iPhone. It's kind of like the category of products that we're going to be using after we're finished buying smartphones. What is that next big thing? According to Apple, this is going to be it. And we've been talking wearables for a while. Everyone's been trying virtual reality headsets. No one really, you might buy a Quest from Meta, but it's like, a couple $1,000 and then you play a few games with it and then it sits in a drawer. This is different. This is virtual reality. It's augmented reality together, which is known as mixed reality. You can do work on it. It can replace a computer in theory. the potential for this platform. And Tim Coates said, we're launching a platform with some hardware. So it isn't about the hardware. It's about creating this new, what you referred to it, spatial computing paradigm, this new kind of computing, sort of like the way personal computers changed the rules 40 plus years ago, sort of like the way smartphones changed the rules 15-ish years ago. Now we're looking at what happens after smartphones. Apple's just given us the best look.
By the way, just to your point, when I compared this to all the other virtual reality headsets, this is, as you just said, not that. This is you wear it and you can write documents, do email. It's a computer you wear. Is that fair?
That's exactly it. And I think that's what really jumped out at me was this wasn't just another virtual reality headset that lets me play games or walk around Mark Zuckerberg's distorted view of the metaverse. This is, I could take my laptop and I could toss it because I could put this headset on and I could write something in Microsoft Word, or I could update a spreadsheet in Excel, or do my email in Outlook, or participate in a Zoom or a Microsoft Teams call. All the stuff that I would normally do on a laptop, I can do in this too, completely immersed because this incredibly high resolution screen, this space is just projected in 3D in front of my eyes. And then the cool party trick here that nothing else can do because everyone else is just virtual reality, this is more, is that if someone walks into my room while I'm working on this and starts talking to me, suddenly the device will recognize that they're there. And instead of me being completely immersed, it'll become more transparent. And now I'll be able to see them and interact with them. The sound goes down a little bit so that I can then have a conversation with them. And we can interact. Yeah, like the demos are crazy. I cannot wait to get this thing on my head just to see it. And of course it's version 1, and of course it's incredibly expensive, but it's that potential to take computing, which for the last 15, 20, 30 years really hasn't changed much. You sit at a keyboard in front of a flat screen. Yes, it gets better and faster every year, but it's still the same method of computing. That kind of gets old. Imagine having a thing on your head that you could take anywhere, and it replaces your smartphone, replaces your laptop, replaces all these things. We're not going to get there right now, but the potential is definitely there as the industry starts to pivot in that direction. Much the same way the first PCs weren't anything to write home about, this probably isn't either. But version 2 and version 3, watch out.
So I always think that the price point with Apple products is going to be a deterrent, but that has never seemingly been the case.
It isn't, because Apple is what we like to call a near luxury brand. So, when you buy an iPhone compared to an Android phone, you pay what we like to call the Apple Premium. They are a bit more expensive. MacBook Pros and MacBook Airs are more expensive to a certain degree than their equivalent Windows-powered machines. But for people who use Apple products, and I sort of straddle the line, I use both. I use all platforms because of the nature of my work, but my workflow, like my key machines, are all Apple for that reason, because I feel long-term they may cost more up front, but you get access to things that you can't get on other platforms. It's not about the hardware. It's about the ecosystem. It's about the software that you use. If all my friends are using FaceTime and all my family members are using FaceTime, I kind of have to have it. If everyone is using Apple Fitness, I kind of have to have an Apple device. And that's why Apple is the most valuable company in the world, because they're not just selling devices. Everyone else is. They're selling devices that plug into a much bigger world, and they're kind of hoping that Vision Pro is like that too. And if you look at, it is shocking, $34.99 US. It's a pretty big number. But the thing is, the relative number is, I'm not buying a laptop anymore. I'm not buying an iPad anymore. I'm not buying a whole bunch of other things, because this sort of takes all those devices and puts them into one. Hard to see that today. But 5 years from now, we'll have this conversation, and that's kind of where we'll be at. So in that context, not as expensive as you think, and $3,500 will get cheaper over time. Remember, the first computers were super expensive too, and they got cheaper too, as did smartphones, as did tablets. This is going to follow a similar curve.
Well, let me go from high tech to low tech, but good news. In Quebec, yay for Quebec, a move to ban basically planned obsolescence, right? Because, we say stuff now is designed to last a couple of years, and then manufacturers would rather you throw it out and get a new one than try to fix anything, and this law will address that.
It's exactly it. There's a reason why, Apple doesn't allow you to easily change the battery. You can't just pop it out and pop a new one in. It's welded inside. You have to bring it back to them. In some cases, the parts aren't even replaceable, or you get an estimate to repair it, and it's so expensive you may as well just buy a new one. The industry has been moving in that direction in recent years, which, of course, is very consumer hostile. European Union introduced the new mandate last year that compels manufacturers to make sure that the right to repair is maintained. So your device has to be more repairable. It's got to be designed for it. They also have to make things like manuals and parts and support and service available, not just to you and me, but also to repair shops. Where have all the repair shops gone? They've disappeared because there's no market. Well, the tech industry has to change their ways. It started in Europe, but the cool thing is that Canada, in their most recent federal budget, said we're going to do the same thing, and we're going to also add a common charger mandate. Everything's got to be USB-C, so you don't have to buy a different one for all your devices. Well, now Quebec is jumping on the bandwagon, and even though in the overall scheme of things, it's only one province, it reinforces this global trend that maybe someday we'll be able to take that laptop that, has a broken key, bring it down to a local repair shop and have it repaired in an affordable way so we don't have to trash it and buy a new one. I think that's amazing because right now e-waste is a huge problem. Mm-hmm. And when you throw a laptop out, when a laptop goes to landfill, it's incredibly bad for the planet, and we are wasting way too much. We've got to learn to be more sustainable.
Step in the right direction for sure. CARMI, thank you so much.
Thanks, guys.
CTV Tech Analyst CARMI Levy every Thursday afternoon.
Informative.
Interactive.
And always interesting.
This is Montreal Now with Aaron Rand and Natasha Hall.
That wraps up another edition of The Week That Was here on the iHeartRadio Network. I'm Aaron Rand along with Natasha Hall, and we will see you next week.
Have a fantastic week.
This has been the Montreal Now podcast with Aaron Rand and Natasha Hall.
Listen live on your radio weekday afternoons from 2 to 6
on CJAD 800
or through the iHeartRadio app.